Draco and the Letter from the Future. By Draco, we'll hear about this. Chapter 6. Stones, Dragons, Unicorns, and could the Gryffindors please stay out of trouble for once? Okay, let me summarize. Draco growled, holding up one hand to stop Harry from babbling on and using the other to rub soothing circles into his painfully throbbing temples. While I was gone, which wasn't, as I'd like to point out again, more than 2 weeks, you managed to get your hands on an invisibility cloak that used to belong to your father, roam the school at night, find a mirror that showed you your heart's deepest desire, and run into Dumbledore while at it without getting expelled. Harry returned, grinning sheepishly. That sounds about right. Why am I friends with you? Draco asked, to no one in particular. Because you like me, Harry chuckled. Or at least I think you do. It's hard to tell with the way you complain all the time. Hilarious, Draco snorted. He took a deep breath. I guess a good friend would now hold you a lecture about how dangerous all of this was, and how lucky you are. And I'm sure Hermione already did her share, so I'm going to drop it. How kind of you, Harry noted, his grin revealing how seriously he took Draco at the moment, which was not at all. Draco tried to be offended, but couldn't bring himself to. I guess I should be relieved, Draco mused. I fully expected to come back to new conspiracy theories about Snape. Well, Harry frowned, pursing his lips. He's not trying to kill me again, or to steal whatever Fluffy's hiding, as far as we can tell. Thank Merlin for that, Draco nodded. Half sarcastic, half honest. How about you? Harry asked, reaching for another Christmas chocolate that Draco had brought him from the manor. I see your dad hasn't killed you either. Only because Mother would murder him if he tried, Draco sighed. You should have seen his face when I said that I didn't think being Muggle-born was a bad thing, or that the Weasley family wasn't scum. Harry made a face as he chewed his chocolate. When he'd swallowed, he prodded. But your mum is okay with it? Yes, Draco smiled. She said she trusts my judgment. I'm glad, Harry replied, returning the smile. As January passed and turned into February, things stayed calm for the most part, and Draco was fairly hopeful that Snape had given up his crazy plan in fear of getting caught. He was still over-the-top mean to Harry, of course, but as infuriating as Snape's behavior was, it was hardly life-threatening in any way. It was in February, though, when Snape was announced as a referee for Gryffindor's second match of the season, that all their prior worries crashed back down on them. While Draco knew that Hermione and Weasley's immediate advice, for Harry to not play, was not going to do any good with their stubborn friend, he shared their fear that Snape might be refereeing just for the sake of getting rid of the danger that Harry presented. He can't do much in front of Dumbledore. Draco still tried to reason with them, and maybe a little with himself. It's one thing when he's part of the crowd, but as referee, he'll be the center of attention. It would be stupid of him to try and off Harry that publicly. He knew, though, that despite Harry's outward agreement with him, his words did nothing to quench their nervousness. The whole school seemed to be buzzing with excitement over the match, seeing as with a victory, Gryffindor might be able to overtake Slytherin in the house championship. The Slytherins, including Snape, seemed to become even more vicious towards every Gryffindor they crossed, as if they could intimidate the one house known for its bravery with sheer antagonism. Draco, seeing as he was the only Slytherin who really didn't care about the house championship, the importance of it paled a little in comparison to his best friend's safety. Got his own amount of heat, too, but he was so used to it that he was barely bothered. The Gryffindors, on the other hand, were in equal measures determined to grab their chance, and apathetic of Snape's refereeing. Draco decided to attend the match on the Gryffindor stands with Hermione and Weasley, where, despite some suspicious looks, he was mostly left in peace. He guessed that most of Harry's housemates were aware of their friendship and knew he wasn't there to gloat or start trouble. Why do you have your wands drawn? Longbottom asked them in confusion, and Draco exchanged a quick look with the other two. Practicing wand movements, he lied smoothly, and Hermione nodded, smiling brightly. Longbottom looked confused, but he did not question them further. No, Weasley muttered when he had turned to talk to Thomas and Finnegan. Any funny business from Snape, and we'll send the Meglocker curse straight at him. Draco and Hermione nodded, expressions grim.
Right. Be sure to remember the incantation.
We know the incantation, Hermione, Draco interrupted her, anxious as the teams filed onto the field. Please just do us a favor and be quiet. It turned out they need not have bothered, though. It took merely more than a minute before Harry dived to the ground with a tent and caught the snitch, giving Snape barely enough time to reward an undeserved penalty to Hufflepuff. All of a sudden, Draco found himself enveloped in unbridled Gryffindor euphoria, and he couldn't help but grin along with them, because who cared if Slytherin had lost the lead for the stupid House Cup? Harry was safe and sound, and that was all that mattered. Seeing how everything had gone splendidly, they had not expected Harry to look frantic when he finally caught up with them after the match. He interrupted Weasley's happy babbling with a sharp, "Never mind that now. Let's find an empty room. You wait till you hear this," and dragged them off towards an unused classroom before he dived into a story about some encounter between Snape and Quirrell that Harry had happened to overhear. Draco did not dare ask how he had gotten close enough to spy on the teachers. Draco had a feeling he did not want to know, but he was mildly alarmed as Harry revealed the content of their talk to be the Philosopher's Stone. "So, you were right," Harry hissed. "It is the Philosopher's Stone, and Snape is trying to force Quirrell to help him get it. He asked if he knew how to get past Fluffy. He said something about Quirrell's hocus pocus, so I reckon there were other things guarding the stone apart from Fluffy. Lots of enchantments, probably. And Quirrell would have done some anti-dark arts spell Snape needs to break through." "Oh dear," Draco muttered, feeling another headache on its way.
"So you mean the stone's only safe as long as Quirrell stands up to Snape?"
Hermione asked in alarm. "It'll be gone by next Thursday," Weasley scoffed. No, Draco threw in, trying to reason with the others. "We might be underestimating Quirrell there." When the other three looked at him with raised eyebrows, he added, "Yes, sure, he seems like a balmy coward most of the time, but I'm sure he's stood up to more danger than Snape, or Dumbledore wouldn't have hired him. And if Snape really threatens him, he can always go to Dumbledore for help." His words were met with a dubious silence, but Draco insisted, "It will be fine. I'm sure Dumbledore knows what he's doing. And anyway, it's better if we stay out of this."
"Well,"
Hermione said, slowly biting her lip,
"it's not like we can do much, really. Who will believe us if we blame Snape without any proof?"
"Exactly," Draco nodded. "We're not even supposed to know the bloody things in the school. Let's just stay out of this before we get in trouble." "I don't like this," Harry muttered darkly. "You don't have to like it," Draco shot back. "Just don't stalk Snape trying to find out what he's up to." "I'm not stalking Snape," Harry protested, but he looked satisfactorily abashed and let the subject drop, much to Draco's relief. Thankfully, as the exams drew closer, neither of them had much time to think about Snape or the Philosopher's Stone. Their homework began to increase drastically, and Hermione fell into some kind of revision frenzy, pulling the boys down with her. Draco did not mind much. He spent every night in the Slytherin dorms, studying as it was, but especially Weasley was complaining on top of his lungs, and Harry, Draco soon realized, did not have much patience for focused revision either. Draco, who was much more patient with him than Hermione, tried to help out as best as he could, and it became easy to tell whenever those green eyes lost their focus and his mind wandered somewhere far from their schoolwork. One of those afternoons, spent in the library, was interrupted by a shifty-looking Hagrid who had been trying desperately to hide the book about dragons he had checked out from their sites. Even Draco would not have believed his own feeble suggestion that maybe Hagrid was just interested in the topic. The caretaker was anything but the studious type, so we followed the others down to his hut after dinner to investigate. "We can also ask Hagrid about the enchantments hiding the stone," Harry suggested. Draco groaned inwardly. The curtains of Hagrid's hut were closed tightly as they arrived, and when Hagrid had ushered them in after they had knocked, they entered what resembled a volcanic cave, judging by the temperature. "Hagrid!" Draco groaned, immediately removing his robes. "It's practically summer! What do you have the fire lit for?" Hagrid just muttered something incomprehensible and offered them tea. As Harry eagerly started to question Hagrid about the safety measures concerning the Philosopher's Stone, though, Draco was only listening with one ear. His attention kept drifting to the fire, first out of annoyance, then,
once he had noticed a strange black shape in its midst out of curiosity. "Come on, Hagrid," Hermione said in a smooth voice. "You might not want to tell us, but you do know. You know everything that goes on around here." Draco stifled a laugh at Hermione's tactical flattery, proud to see that she'd learned, and used the moment Hagrid cracked to get to his feet unnoticed.
"Let's see," Hagrid said. "They borrowed Fluffy from me, then some of the teachers did enchantments. Professor Sprout, Professor Flitwick, Professor McGonagall, Professor Quirrell, and Dumbledore did something himself, of course."
Draco quietly strolled over to the fire.
"Hang on, I've forgotten someone. Oh yeah, Professor Snape."
"Snape?"
Harry called incredulous in the same moment that Draco glanced at the dark shape within the fire.
"Hagrid!"
Draco squeaked in a voice much too high. "Why is there a dragon egg in your fire?" Hagrid jumped up at that, eyes wide and guilty. Hagrid stammered. "Boss, where the bloody hell did you get a dragon egg, Hagrid?" Weasley asked, joining Draco by the fire and looking down at it in what was more interest than alarm. "Must have cost you a fortune." Hagrid then proudly dove into the story of how he'd won the egg last night on a drink in the village and explained happily to them how he planned to hatch the egg and raise the dragon. Hermione, at least Draco was glad to know, seemed as shocked about this as he was.
"Hagrid, you live in a wooden house,"
he pointed out. "Not only that," Draco added, "you live a 10 minutes walk from a school. Not only is it dangerous, but everyone could happen to cross it and report you to the ministry. You know that dragon breeding isn't allowed in Britain." "I wouldn't know about Fluffy either," Hagrid said airily. "Apart from us, you mean?" he noted dryly, but he could tell it was no use. Hagrid had that blissful sparkle in his eyes that Draco associated with expectant mothers. While Hagrid's secret gave them something new to worry about and distracted Harry satisfactorily from the stone, Draco now lived in constant fear of the news that their friend had been found out and fired. Befriending Gryffindors, he decided, had been a disastrous life choice for his nerves. One day he would snap and he'd have only his trouble-seeking, evil teachers crossing and dragon-hatching friends to blame for it. When the future Draco had pushed him towards Harry, he surely hadn't known what the other boy would end up pulling him into, or he might have reconsidered. It was a warm morning towards the end of April when Norbert, the baby Norwegian Ridgeback, hatched. Draco, who had always thought he possessed a certain affinity towards the creatures who had been his namesakes, or at least the namesakes for the constellation he was named after, quickly changed his mind. Dragons might be fierce and majestic and nice to look at from afar, but he wanted none of them within a mile's distance of him. Thank you very much. Norbert hissed and bit and spit fire at them, but no matter how much they tried to convince Hagrid to just let Norbert go, he would not hear of it. "It's too small. He'll die," Hagrid insisted, even though Draco, after Norbert had snapped for his fingers more than once and cinched his robes, was pretty sure that the rapidly growing creature could watch out for himself. In the end, when Harry suggested contacting Charlie, the Weasleys' second oldest working with dragons in Romania, Hagrid finally agreed. Thankfully, Charlie was as much of a Gryffindor as his brother because he agreed to send some friends over to pick up the dragon at midnight on Saturday if they could bring him up to the tallest tower of Hogwarts. "I'm coming along," Draco announced the moment Harry told him. "It's better if you don't," Harry frowned. "It's already dangerous as it is, but the more people we are, the bigger the possibility of something going wrong." Draco bristled immediately at those words. The only thing worse than his Gryffindor friends getting him into trouble was them getting themselves into trouble without it. "I see," he glared. "So this is another Gryffindors only. Think of yours." "That's not it," Harry groaned. It's Ron's brother, and you don't need to get involved. "If you say it's got nothing to do with you, I'll hex you," Draco warned. "You're not the only one who cares about Hagrid." Harry looked at him pleadingly.
"I know you care," Harry assured him. "No one ever doubted you did, but we'd have to go all the way to the dungeons to pick you up with the invisibility cloak and—"
"I'll just wait at Hagrid's," Draco shrugged, jaw set in determination. "You can pick me and Norbert up together."
You'd spend a whole night with Hagrid and Norbert just so we could take you along on a nightly trip to the highest tower that might get us expelled if we're found out?
Harry demanded, an edge to his voice.
Yes,
Draco returned stubbornly. That's exactly what I'll do, because without me, you will end up getting yourself expelled, and I won't stand for that!
I've snuck out plenty of times without you before,
Harry countered petulantly. Oh, yes! Draco rolled his eyes. The time when not almost lured you into Filch's arms, and that one when Dumbledore caught you in front of that funky mirror, if I remember correctly. Yes, you're truly an expert!
Harry huffed, but he stopped fighting Draco, and it was better that he did, because Weasley, the oh-so-important key to the operation, landed himself in hospital wing Saturday afternoon due to a bite on his hand, courtesy of Norbert, which meant he had to drop out of their mission. So Draco headed out for Hagrid's hut after dinner and suffered through hours of a teary, emotional Hagrid and a hissing and spitting Norbert. Draco had spent the last half hour preparing Norbert's traveling accommodations with Hagrid, including dead rats for him to snack, brandy, and an ugly teddy bear which Draco was sure would catch fire sometime through the journey, but that would not be his problem to deal with. When Harry knocked, it was only 20 minutes to midnight, meaning he was late.
Sorry, Harry gasped as he entered the hut. Peeves.
Why'd you leave a Marnie?
Draco asked, frowning at the absence of their bushy-haired friend.
How many people do you think this cloak can hide if we carry a basket?
Harry rolled his eyes.
It's just you and me, since you were so dead set on coming.
Hagrid said his tearful goodbye before Harry and Draco heaved the crate containing the dragon up the tallest tower. The thing was ridiculously heavy, and had Draco not fought Harry so vehemently on coming along, he'd have complained. 4 of Charlie Weasley's friends swooped down on their broomsticks and collected Norbert, taking off again after a friendly chat. Harry and Draco watched in relief as they flew out of sight, proud of their achievement. Everything would have gone splendidly if only they'd not run into Peeves on the way back. First, Harry had almost forgotten the cloak due to his euphoria of having gotten rid of Norbert, but Draco had reminded him at the last moment. They could have as well left it up the tower, though, because Draco had ended up tripping over a bunch of crystal balls the Poltergeist had nicked from the divination classroom, sending both him and Harry crashing to the floor and causing the cloak to fall off their shoulders. As fate would have it, that had been the moment Filch had entered the room and caught them. He had woken Professor McGonagall and Professor Snape to punish them. Their spitting rage was only rivaled by how mad Draco was at himself. He had come along to make sure Harry did not end up in trouble, and in the end, he'd managed to ruin the whole mission by behaving like a klutz who could not watch where he was going. By some stroke of luck, they did not get expelled, but 50 points were taken from each of them, and they got detention, which Draco realized could have gone much, much worse. So he counted the small blessings, even as the Slytherins bullied him ever so harshly once the story of who had cost them 50 points in one night reached them. The Gryffindors, being the house of trouble-loving adventurers they were, did not seem to care as much about the loss of points, especially in the light of them keeping their position on top of the house championship despite the loss. But Harry took the new wave of animosity against Draco more to heart than Draco did himself.
I should never let you come,
Harry muttered as he helped Draco rinse out the scarlet paint that had been dumped on Draco's robes between glasses.
As if Hermione could have lived with you losing 100 points for Gryffindor,
Draco scoffed.
At least I'm used to this, so no harm done.
No more meddling from now on, Harry swore to him with a huff. I won't get any of us in trouble anymore.
It's not like it's your fault, Draco sighed. Though, mind you, I'd appreciate some quiet. I doubt you could stay out of trouble if you tried, though.
Well, watch me, Harry vowed, and much to Draco's surprise, he did seem to be serious about it. When he overheard a conversation between Snape and Quirrell a few days later, suggesting that the latter might have cracked, Harry refused to investigate further or alert Dumbledore in fear of getting more people into trouble, and Draco thought that maybe this whole ordeal had been worth something after all. For detention, they were called to the entrance hall to meet Filch at 11 o'clock that night. Draco was the first to arrive, and he had to listen to Filch reminiscing about the punishments of the old days for a good 5 minutes before Harry finally joined them.
Not that Filch stopped talking about his deep-rooted desire to cause students physical pain as he led them out of the castle, but at least he had Harry to exchange annoyed looks with. Harry, though, seemed to feel far more nervous about their punishment than Draco, but his face lightened up when they met Hagrid. This did not go unnoticed by Filch.
I suppose you think you'll be enjoying yourself with that oaf, he sneered. Well, think again, boy. It's another forest you're going, and I'm much mistaken if you're all come out in one piece.
This made Draco whirl around to stare at the caretaker, all his calmness gone. "The forest?" he called. "We can't go in there! There's all sorts of things in there! Werewolves, I heard!"
That's your lookout, isn't it? Filch said cheerfully, thoroughly enjoying himself. Should have thought of them werewolves before you got in trouble, shouldn't you?
Draco tried to catch Harry's eye in panic, but the other boy was looking at Hagrid, who was approaching them in fast steps with Fang at his heels. Draco noted with rising panic that he was armed. Hagrid sent off the caretaker gruffly and finally turned to Harry and Draco. "Tell me he wasn't serious," Draco pleaded. "Tell me we're not going into the forest."
"Afraid we are, Draco,"
Hagrid said grimly. "But," Draco began, though he held in when he felt Harry's hand on his elbow. "Nothing will happen to us when Hagrid is around," he told him, squeezing his arm in a soothing gesture. Then he turned back to Hagrid. "What are we going to do in there?" he asked.
"I'm not going to lie. It won't be a picnic,"
Hagrid grumbled. He walked towards the edge of the forest with them and pointed down a dark path leading into it. The light of Hagrid's lamp shone ahead, though it did not help as much as Draco would have liked it to.
"Look there. See that stuff shining on the ground? Silvery stuff? That's unicorn blood."
"Oh, now I feel much better," Draco muttered, receiving another squeeze from Harry, who had not removed his hand from Draco's arm, as if fearing the Slytherin would take off running if he let go.
"There's a unicorn in there been hurt badly by something."
Hagrid continued, ignoring Draco.
"This is the second time in a week. I found one dead last Wednesday. We're going to try and find the poor thing. We might have to put it out of its misery."
"And what if whatever hurt the unicorn finds us first?"
Draco asked, gulping. "There's nothing in the forest that will hurt you if you're with me or Fang,"
Hagrid said offhandedly, and Draco willed himself to believe him. As they made their way into the dark forest, it was Draco's turn to hold on to Harry's arm. He hated this, he thought quietly. Why couldn't they just write lines or something? Have a normal detention? For a moment, he wondered what his parents would say if they knew what he was doing right now, but he pushed the thought away quickly. His father would probably think he deserved it for hanging out with the likes of Harry, Hermione, and Weasley in the first place, and his mother would be so scandalized that she might still oppose to his friendship to them after all. They soon reached a crossing of ways, and Hagrid sent Draco and Harry to the left with Fang, while he took the path to the right. This did not help Draco's nerves, though Harry's alert calmness was a small comfort. "I don't like this," Draco muttered, still holding on to Harry and peeking into the shadows obsessively. "Do you feel like we're being watched? Because it does feel like that to me." "Draco," Harry sighed, though he was too tense to be completely unaffected. "It will be fine. Hagrid wouldn't have taken us in here if he thought something might attack us." "He doesn't know what the thing attacking unicorns is, though," Draco pointed out. "Unicorns are fast, much faster than we are." "They don't have horns, though," Harry shrugged. "We've handled a mountain troll. I think we are safe." "Trolls are stupid, though," Draco muttered, but when Harry glared at him, he fell silent. They continued walking, carefully lighting their paths with their wands, but they came across nothing for a long time. Just when Draco was starting to hope that Hagrid would find and catch whatever was doing the killing without them, though, the traces of blood on the path before them increased, indicating that they were right on the tracks of the unicorn. It was then that they came across a clearing, and Harry shot out his arm to stop Draco. "Look," he muttered, and Draco's eyes focused on the bright white figure of the unicorn lying on the ground. They took a few careful steps closer, but the creature did not move, and Draco was pretty sure it was dead. He was just turning to Harry to point this out and suggest they send up green sparks to alert Hagrid, when something moved in the bushes on Harry's side, and they both froze. A hooded figure rose from the bush and stalked towards the unicorn, bending down until the face touched the wound of the unicorn and...
Oh, Merlin! Draco screamed. He used his hold on Harry's hand to pull him backwards, but Harry stumbled. Fang had started to run, whimpering as he did, and Draco wanted nothing more than to follow him, but Draco's scream had alerted the hooded figure, which had raised its head and was now watching them. Draco could not see its face. Darkness hid it from his view. It rose to its feet again and moved over to them. Draco pulled at Harry's arm again, but the other let out a pained sound and only stumbled into Draco, seeming to lose his footing. Harry's hand had flown to his forehead, and he was clutching it, his face screwed up in pain, though his eyes were wide and focused on the creature approaching them. "Harry!" Draco whimpered, pulling again, and then the sound of hooves filled the air. Draco turned just in time to see another creature, this time four-legged, approach them in a wild gallop. Draco screamed again, and then pulled Harry to the ground, half draping himself over his friend in a wild instinct. The other creature jumped over them, and Draco closed his eyes. There was movement, but nothing touched them, and then an eerie silence. When he dared to blink, the four-legged creature stood bent over them. With a gasp, he pushed Harry backwards, who made a sound of pained protest, but Draco just grabbed him and tried to crawl away in a desperate attempt to escape to... "There is no need to be afraid," a clear male voice said, and Draco froze. Looking up, the creature had the body of a palomino horse, but the body of a man. It stared at them with deep blue eyes and a worried expression. "You're a centaur!" Draco breathed, still slightly hysterical. The man nodded. Harry looked up then too, the painful grimace gone. His hand fell from his forehead, and he looked first at the centaur, then at Draco. "Are you all right?" the creature asked, offering a hand both to Harry and to Draco. "Yes,"
Harry muttered, accepting the help, and only when Harry was back on his feet did Draco reach out to let himself be pulled from the ground too.
"Thank you. What was that?"
The centaur did not answer. He only looked at Harry, observing him carefully. His eyes hung for a moment at Harry's scar. "You are the Potter boy," he said. "You had better get back to Hagrid. The forest is not safe at this time, especially for you. Can you ride?" He looked from Harry to Draco and back again. "It will be quicker this way." The centaur lowered himself onto his forelegs to allow them to mount him, and though Draco was weary, his parents had never spoken highly of centaurs. Harry showed no such reservations, swinging his legs over the centaur's back immediately. Draco had no choice but to follow, clinging to Harry tightly as he did. "My name is Ferenz," the centaur informed them as he stood again, but then the sound of more hooves approaching them made them halt. Two more centaurs were galloping towards them, one looking outraged and angry, a lot more like Draco had imagined the creature to look, and the other nervous and gloomy. "Ferenz!" the first one called. "What are you doing? You have a human on your back! Have you no shame? Are you a common mule?" And then they fell into a heated discussion, which Draco could not follow very well. Harry's name was mentioned again, and the heavens, and the unicorn, and in the end Ferenz took off with them, angry and determined. Harry, feeling much more courageous than Draco, asked Ferenz about the creature he had saved Harry and Draco from, and Ferenz evaded the question, instead talking about the uses of unicorn blood, how the magical properties of the blood kept a person close to death alive, but cursed them in return.
"But who'd be that desperate?" Harry asked. "If you're going to be cursed forever, death's better, isn't it?"
"It is," Ferenz agreed, "unless all you need is to stay alive long enough to drink something else. Something that will bring you back to full strength and power. Something that will mean you can never die. Mr. Potter, do you know what is hidden in the school at this very moment?"
"The Philosopher's Stone," Harry gasped. "Of course, the elixir of life, but I don't understand who—"
"Can you really think of nobody who has waited many years to return to power? Who has clung to life awaiting their chance?" It hit Draco at the same moment as it hit Harry, and he felt like he was going to be sick. For years he had heard his father talk about the Dark Lord, and how he had had the right ideas about purity of blood and the rule of true wizards, and he had made it all seem so glorious, like a sacred mission.
"You cannot repeat any of this publicly,"
his father had told him, eyes glinting.
"I swore in front of the wizarding mat that I revoke my ways, and I need to play my part. So do you. But I want you to know, Draco."
And Draco had believed it, all of it, until he had gotten that letter from the future, until he had met Harry, who the Dark Lord had tried to kill along with his parents. A thought that made Draco feel even sicker. What if he had succeeded? He could not imagine his life without Harry. He had only known the boy for a couple of months, but he felt as integral to Draco's life now as nothing else. He could not let the person who had tried to kill him come back to power. He could not let it happen. It would put Harry in danger all over again. They found Hagrid then, and Firenze left them in his care. He directed some words of caution to Harry before he left, and Hagrid questioned Harry about what had happened, but Draco could not listen. His head was buzzing. He wondered feebly if this was what a panic attack felt like. He only stared at Harry as the other talked, gesturing with his hands, and felt a strange, overwhelming urge to grab him and run away with him, to hide him away from the world in a place where no one would ever find him. Draco knew then, as clear as day, that he would do everything to protect Harry from harm, even if it meant standing in the way of the Dark Lord's wand.